Steve, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today. I always think it's fun to have folks come on that I have been able to have the pleasure of working with for the last couple of years, which has been great. And I think this is going to be a unique conversation for us today as well, just because of your journey and what it's looked like and where it's taken you. So no spoiler alerts. We'll wait until we get to that journey part of what you're doing now, and how referrals supported you through that. But I want to give an overview first for our listeners to kind of have an idea of like what were your results kind of like starting out over the last 3 years. So you came to work with me starting back in the early part of 2021. And we set your goal, as we do with everybody, based on where you are and where you need to go. We set your goal of the referrals you wanted in that first year to be 30 referrals. And in 9 months in 2021, you got 54 referrals, which was incredible. Then next year, you got 60 referrals, 2022. And then I have tracking through the first half of 2023, which was 63 referrals in just the first 6 months of this year. So you have continued to trend upwards, which has been amazing. And we'll talk about why I only have tracking for the first 6 months of this year, because you did a big shift, which was something that referrals helped you do. So we'll talk about that in a minute, but you have definitely, let's be honest, put in the work to be able to produce the results that you have, obviously having the roadmap as well. But how did increasing your yearly referrals, like as you did it year after year, how did that positively impact your law practice?
First of all, thanks for having me, Stacey. It's good to see you. Actually, it even had a huge impact in the first year, because 21, we came right out of COVID and all the uncertainty that kind of went with that. So to generate those 54 referrals in those 9 months allowed me to keep my staff, full time, not to have to cut her hours back. So, immediately in 2021, I had a positive impact from it. And then by continuing it year after year, it basically just allowed me to kind of see that there is a way to generate this business that can actually be systematic and produce results that can become somewhat predictable on a certain level. So it had a huge impact for the first year and even really till today, which we'll get to later.
Yeah, perfect. And so when anybody starts working with me, right now, yours was a little bit because of COVID had happened and you were looking to make sure that you just kept this strong, great law firm that you had built for 15 years, right? Well, back then it was like, 12 years or something like that, that it kept going, right? That it kept its momentum. COVID had happened. Like you said, there was a lot of uncertainties and you wanted a little bit more of a predictable way, but also a way that felt good, right? For you to be able to generate new clients, and referrals was it. But I'm guessing, as with everybody who comes to work with me, you probably had some preconceived notions of what it was going to take to generate referrals, and they probably didn't fit who you are. And so finding the way that we teach it, like, without the asking, without the manipulating and all of that, obviously it's one of those things where it's like, oh, this is different. But what were some of your own personal preconceived notions that you had about referrals that you now think differently about because of the success you've had and the processes and the strategies and the plans you have in place?
Probably one of the biggest ones was that I thought referrals were kind of just random. They were like one-off things that would just happen periodically and they'd pop up. I'd be like, yay, I got a new prospect, and I wouldn't do anything with it. But I didn't really think about taking any steps beyond just that one person who was sent to me. I never thought about going to the person that actually referred them back then. Or to like mine that person for a little bit more possible relationship building. Everything that I had prior to working the program, I did through kind of the larger referral groups like BNIs, BRNs, and things of that nature. And they can certainly have a place for some people, but they're not my forte. I'm not go into a crowded room with a lot of people kind of person. I'm more of a one-on-one kind of guy who likes to build relationships organically and just kind of see where they go. So, I've tried the bigger group things, but um, I now know that I can use my assets, my time, my money, my relationship building techniques in a targeted way instead of just kind of putting it out there in a large group setting and hope people refer to me just because I'm a member. Hopefully that makes sense, but I didn't want to create something where people were just sending me business to check it off of a box or meeting with me in a one-to-one just to check a box that they had done that. I wanted to build something that would last. And the direct result of that, I think, is that I now have a system in place where people know me, I know them, we know the kinds of clients that we all work with. And year after year, I'm looking at new people to become those referral sources. And I'm doing it all in a way that I can completely make custom to me.
Yeah, it's what works for you, right? I mean, I think there are even people probably listening that are like, "Oh, I love being in big groups of people," but that doesn't actually mean it produces any results, right? I mean, there's one thing we always say is that when you are going to do something to bring in business to your company, to your firm, it needs to work, but it also has to feel right because that's the only way you'll keep it going. Is it's got to feel good and it's got to work. And finding that strategy and that system, I think, is really important. And some things people overlook until they find it and they're like, oh, I'll never do it different. Like this works great for me. So I think that's really good. And to be honest, like I love sharing people's results. And because you've been working with me long enough that I take full on credit. I'm like, yep. Like, look at what Steve did, right? Like, I am not afraid to take full on credit. But the truth is, it's because you put in the work, right? You got the roadmap, you did what you needed to do, right? When you had questions, you asked for help. I mean, that is the beauty of our coaching program. But you've been consistent for 3 years now and really following the processes and doing the strategies. And that doesn't mean life doesn't happen and maybe you like fall off the wagon for a few months and then you have to get back on. We're all human. That happens to all of us. But what difference has that really made for you specifically to knowing you have a strategy and what that looks like from that perspective and how you take that strategy with you moving forward? It's a little teaser there. You'll have to fill in the audience what I'm talking about.
So I think the largest difference is it's just a big stress reliever. Honestly, it kind of, would get me stressed out to think about like, okay, well, I have to go to this meeting with people I don't really want to know in the past. And I remember when I first started with you, one of my biggest things was like, what do I do with people that I meet and I just have no interest in, developing that relationship. And some group settings require you to continue to pursue that. But by now knowing that I can tweak my own referral plan to be with partners that I click with personally, I click with professionally, kind of makes me just look at the entire referral game in a different light. It's less of a chore. It's more of building professional colleagues, even friends out of it, because you just get to know the people that you want to know instead of throwing darts on a wall and hoping that something happens because you're a member of an organization or whatever may come from that. And I think one of the other biggest differences that it made is it removed a lot of the valleys in my revenue stream. So, every business owner knows that you have peaks and valleys, and especially, COVID on, things were kind of rocky those first couple of years. But by doing the program, it kind of allowed me to benefit from other people's peaks, even if I was in a valley, because if they had overflow work or just conflict work, they would send me some referrals. So it made my valleys, I guess, less impactful. It made my
Yeah, less
revenue
severe.
stream, yeah, less severe and less long.
Yeah.
It shortened the duration of them. So it also kind of got word of mouth out there about what I was doing. I was building relationships with other professionals. Those other professionals would then run into other people that I was trying to build relationships with. And I would get through the grapevine that, oh, I met so and he knows you and says he works with you. And people started noticing that I was building my business kind of in that way, that a lot of people were talking about my firm and what we were doing. So ultimately, eventually, another firm kind of approached me and said, hey, let's talk about the things that you've been doing because we like what we've heard and see.
I think that is amazing. I mean, the idea that you took a strategy and multiple strategies, right? You put the systems in place, but at the end of the day, Steve, you worked it, right? You continued to do it. You continued to work it. It obviously you had results with it, what worked great, but it was noticed, and it was noticed not just by the people that you knew in your circle, but it started your brand reputation, right? I mean, it started to build the reputation that you had, that your brand had, that here's what you've been cultivating, here's what you've been doing, and it made you a hot commodity, right? It made you a hot commodity. And there's lots of attorneys listening that would think, well, I went out on my own. I would never want to go back into another firm. But that's not your journey, right? For you, you've been on your own for 15 years, and you made the decision this year, right, in the middle of this year, that when they were pursuing you, you're like, this is actually something I want to do. I want to try this, and I want to consider, right, merging into this other firm. And they pursued you because they saw what you were doing. Your reputation in a very good way started to precede itself. And it was all about because you had a strategy and a system behind you where you were continuing to cultivate those relationships. And so now you're on a different trajectory, but as you and I talk about, that doesn't change what you're doing. You still take these strategies, these processes, these systems that you've learned with me, and you just take them and keep them going. And the reality is that's probably exactly what the other law firm wants. They didn't want you to show up and be like, okay, I'm not doing that anymore. They're like, no,
Oh.
we want you because of that. And I think that is a huge testament to the success that you've had. So that's got to feel really good.
It does. And I think you're right. I mean, in essence, I'm doing the same exact thing that I was doing on my own. I'm just doing it under a different name on the door, a different umbrella. So, and you're right that I put the work into it. But the nice thing about what I learned by working with you is that it doesn't feel like work when you're doing it the way you want to do it with the types of people that you want to work with. It just kind of feels like you're building your professional network of colleagues, friends, whatever, but it's not a stressful, hard thing. It's just time getting to know other humans and learning other human stories and how you can help them and they can help you. And it's just mutually beneficial.
Yeah. And I like the fact that the way we teach referrals has that holistic perspective to it so that you can pick it up and take it to another. In your case, you're still an attorney. You're just picking up what you do and you're doing it within another law firm. But I remember, like, this is a number of years ago that I had somebody go through the program and they were a doggy daycare. And then she picked up the strategies and what she had learned, and then she applied it to becoming a business coach. Like, you can't get much different from like a doggy daycare owner to becoming a business coach, right? Except for the fact that she had run a business, right? I mean, obviously that was the connection. She had done the doggy daycare for a number of years, but she was like, I just picked up the strategies, the systems, the processes, and I just put them over here and just kept doing them within the functionality of my business coaching. And I think that is the thing, that transferableness, right, of what you're learning. I mean, you still have to keep it going. That's an important piece. But that transferableness is really, really important. And it's one thing that I think people like overlook, and they don't pay attention to how it can go with you, right? And take it with you. And you obviously taking it with you from that perspective. So I remember, I think it was, sometimes these years run together. The longer I work with someone, I'm like, wait, was this year? Was that last spring? Was that this spring? I can't remember. I think it was last spring, but here, never there, right? I remember that you were on one of our weekly Q&A calls within the BRB program, and you were sharing that you had gotten 8 referrals in a week, right? And there was that initial response, and for me, that I was like, of course you did. Right? Because you've been working the process, you've been working the system. Now, we don't expect 8 referrals in a week to happen every single week. I mean, of course not. We don't have that expectation. But I think it's really cool. And I think that there are other attorneys that would say that you can't put processes and systems in place to generate referrals consistently. So I know you disagree. What would you tell that attorney that doesn't think that the processes and the systems can work?
Well, I would say unless they're getting fed work from like some sort of superior or they have an institutional client like an insurance company, school board, or some sort of business, you almost have to have some sort of plan or process in place to generate business. Otherwise, I don't know how you would keep your door open. And I think every law firm I know wants their lawyers or associates to generate business on some level. And I think most lawyers do have some sort of system or process in place, but they don't realize that they're doing it or they haven't formalized it. Like we talked about, BNI chamber groups, Rotary clubs. I know a lot of attorneys who are members of those types of organizations. I know a lot of attorneys who send thank you cards, or call to say thank you, or ask to grab coffee or go to lunch just to cultivate a relationship. So they might not be really intentional about it, but I think a lot do have some of the pieces that they need to have to try to start building that referral network. And what I found nice about um, working together with you, and why I would probably encourage others to do it, is because it just allows you to be much more strategic about what you're doing and kind of more aware of some of the tools that you already have or that you're already using. So, efficiency, I guess, kind of comes across as one of the bottom lines, where I spend my time, where I spend my money, instead of just again trying to hit some sort of random target by throwing darts on a wall. So if you don't have a system in place, I think you need one. And the nice thing about this one is it's yours. And it uses your own strengths and forces you to recognize your own weaknesses. Um, and how to do that and how to go about putting that plan together.
Yeah, I think that I always like to tell folks is that there's a lot of stuff I'm going to teach you when you come into the coaching program, just because you have access to all 19 right now. That's currently how many strategies we have, and we're always adding if there's something we need to add. But because you have access to all 19 of the strategies, and it's not just one individual strategy that you have access to, which some people do, and that's fine. But because you have access to all 19 strategies, it really allows you to customize what you need. And if there's something you need to feel like you need to work on or improve on, you can go grab that piece of information and then customize it to fit within your own processes and procedures. And I think that there's, like, we always tell folks when people are like, so is there one right way to do this? And I'm like, the thing you have to understand is that the only thing you have to know is that you're not allowed to ask for referrals, and you're not allowed to incentivize, and you're not allowed to feel like you've got to waste a ton of time and network all the time, and you cannot be gimmicky and promotional. But other than that, what we're going to teach you is going to show you how to honor and respect your relationships, but they're your relationships and you know your people best. And so figuring out what that process looks like, I mean, obviously, as you know, we give you guardrails. We're like, hey, there's a couple of
Yep.
things you have to do, and these are must haves, but a couple other things are like you could, if you wanted to make it fit you. Because going back to what I said earlier, even within the processes that I teach, even within the individual strategies that I teach, I know for you to keep it going for you now 3 years in, I know for you to keep it going 3 years in, or Catherine, another attorney who's on her 7th year, right? I know you guys have to enjoy it while it also has to work, which means there has to be a level of customization. There
Yeah.
has to be a level of it fitting your personality and who you are, as long as it's doing right by the people that you have these relationships with, which in our cases, of course, are referral sources. So I think that's a really good point that you bring up. So you're actually one of our
If I
alumni. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Sorry. If I can too, I would just say that by continuing to just build relationships, you create a network of people who are also rooting for you. And you don't have to ask for referrals. It's just kind of a natural want to for people after you get to know them, after they know how you treat your clients. And even the things that don't work when you do your plan still accomplish a goal of getting your name out there, keeping top of mind presence on people. Not every event or every touch point which that you'll do in your plan is going to be a success, or as successful as others, but there's still some sort of silver lining out of doing any of it.
Right. Absolutely. Okay, so this is something different and interesting. You are one of our alumni members of BRB coaching program, which means you graduated. You were a part of my world for almost 3 full years, and you graduated this summer, specifically because you went to merge with the other firm, and it was just the right time. So when you think of which, and let me be honest, that's the actual point. When people come into the coaching program, I'm like, it's a year. Now, that doesn't mean you may not hang around for a couple more years after that. I love that. I love my people who are with me. But the point is for you to come in, for you to get what you need, build your strategy, build your system, to watch you execute, watch it work for you over 12 months, and then graduate, right? So most of the time when I bring BRB coaching members onto the podcast, they're in it, right? So like previous to this, we had Lois, she was like a month in, right? We had Randall, and he was like 8 months in or 7 months in or something like that. And earlier this year, we had other folks who came onto the program who'd been in it like maybe just over a year, or they were hitting the 1 year mark, but they were in it. But you're one of the first people, I think, that I brought on that's actually graduated, that you're now an alumni member. So how did you know the time was right? Because I think this is important for people to understand. You're allowed to leave, right? You're allowed to graduate. You're allowed to leave me. How did you know the time was right for you? And what's life kind of been like over the last few months since you have fully gotten into this new firm, but also graduated from BRB?
Well, I think one of the biggest things was, you do enter the program with the knowledge that you're trying to learn and be educated so that you can apply this stuff on your own. We all like to have the Stacey safety net underneath us after we do that. So, I stayed for a couple more years, but then I started realizing, okay, well, I had 3 years of consistent results that were also growing, so I saw that. I found myself tweaking things instead of making wholesale changes or coming in with like these big concept questions for you. It was more nuanced type things where I'm like, okay, well, what about this particular situation to me, instead of more about the program at that point. And doing the calls, gradually you just, or at least I did, I started realizing that there's people who are really, really green and new to the program, and they're not where I am. So a lot of the questions, I just found that I had already experienced that or learned that. And it just felt like the time was there for me to go on my own, and do what I had learned through you. And I've been doing it since. I think officially we stopped tracking through your program back in June or May or June. And since then, I've received another 16 or 17 referrals in the second half of this year. So I haven't stopped doing BRB. I've just, graduated and still do the day-to-day program, just like I did every time I would see you.
Yeah. And like at the time of this recording, you still have a whole quarter to go. Right.
I
So
do.
if you were at the 6-month mark with me, you were at 63 referrals. So the first 6 months of this year, 2023, you're at 63 referrals. You've got about 17 or 18 more. And Steve, we both know I'm not going to do public math. So do you know what that is? 63 plus 17. Hold on.
I think I'm supposed to
Everyone listening is like, here's the answer. Like everybody, here's how you add. I'm going to pull out my calculator, right? So
close to
63
80 something.
plus 17. Yeah, it's right at 80, right? So it's 80, and that's in 9 months, and you still have a whole quarter to go. So you've got to have to check back in with me around Christmas time and let me know what the year ended. But like, this is a massive transgression. I mean, transgression. That is not what I meant to say. This is a massive. Now I don't even know what I was going to say. Let me start this again for our poor listeners who are like, what? When you think about this, this is like a massive shift for you. in terms of what business looks like. We are always super pleased that when you first got into the program and then we started tracking your results, we wanted you to get 30 referrals and you got 54. And then the next year you got 60. And now you're at 80, 9 months in, and you'll probably, I wouldn't be surprised if you hit 100, if you hit triple digits. And you're doing it without me. And that, I think, is the most important thing I wanted my listeners to hear, is that, yeah, you hung around for 3 years and that's awesome. And I've got people who hang around for 6 years. And to speak to the Stacey safety net, it's real and I am happy about it. But other people use it as just like that motivation to stay the course. They're kind of like, Alex said, he's a real estate agent. He was on the podcast earlier this year. He said, hey, when you pay attention. And for some folks, it's like that investment is important for me to do every single year, so I don't fall off course, or that I have access to Stacey when I need it. And for others, you get to a place you're like, I've got this. And that is exactly where I want everyone to eventually get, is like, hey, I've got this. I could do this on my own. And you're doing it, Steve, which is amazing. I'm so proud of you. Okay.
The accountability is huge when you're starting out,
Right.
to be able to have somebody who's keeping you accountable. But what I love about it now is that my referral sources don't care about the name on the door. They care about the relationship with me. So even during that transition, I didn't really lose anything. I didn't lose anybody, which was something that we had talked about prior to me doing it. Like, am I going to lose people doing this? And I didn't. And I attribute a lot of that to your program because the relationships were solid during that whole time period.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I want people to recognize, that there are moments in your business, and you don't always know when they're coming, right? But there are moments in your business where we need to, like, I like to call it, for what I say with you guys, is like, we need to manage the message here, right? Like, and there's an opportunity to use this as there's a chance to use this as a great opportunity to really lean into those relationships and manage that message so that they understand what's happening. And that's one of the things that we teach. Like, it's like I tell folks, I'm like, hey, you're about to roll out a brand new website. There are moments within that rollout of that website that we can do specific things, little tiny tactics that help us from a referral perspective. And most people are like, we can? And I'm like, yes, right? Or you're changing the name of your business, or you hit a massive anniversary, or maybe you decide to like offer a new service. Like, all these changes that shift and happen as businesses are growing and developing and maturing, those are all moments to leverage from a referral perspective. No different you merging in with another firm because they came courting and you decided to say yes. But most people don't think about it. And so it'll be like, after the fact, they'll be like, wait, I could have done something to manage my referral process through this transition or through this launch or through this overhaul. I'm like, yes, you just got to tell me in advance so that I can help you figure that out. And that was one thing when you came to me and you're like, hey, I think I'm good. And I was like, I think you're good too. And then you said, I'm going to merge in with this other firm. I was like, you're not done yet. We need to work through this process. I mean, I was like, give me one more quarter. Let's work through this process and get you ready and get you right into the summer as you make that merger efficiently and effectively. And you said the magic words to me: I didn't lose any one of my referral sources. And that to me tells me that it works. And so sometimes it's just the forethought, right? Or the foresight to be like, oh yeah, I need to think through this differently and apply something different. And sometimes that's why you need a guide to help you. But you're right. You got to a point, you were like, I think I got all this. I'm like, yeah, you do. It's all right. You're allowed to leave the nest. That's important. Yeah. So, okay. So just a final question. If there was another attorney listening to this episode, or just even another business owner, and they're listening, what would you tell them based on, I mean, I know you've said a lot of great things, but what else would you want them to know about why they should join BRB?
I would first say just to do it. I mean, try it out. Like, it's not this endless rabbit hole with no end in sight. Like, it's a program that's designed to teach you something that you can implement on your own for as long as you want to do it. And you see dividends from that, both immediate and long term. So, try it out, put the work in, learn the process. And even if you like to do the big group referral things like BNI or the chamber, doing this program's only going to help you foster those relationships inside of that group, because you still need to build out, who is a good referral source, who's not, who you jive with, who you don't, and how to make those touch points throughout the year so that you're top of mind when somebody needs you. So I just really say, if you want to stand out amongst your referral sources, this program is the way to do that. And it's designed to let you learn it and fly on your own. So just do it.
I love it.
I guess I can't say just do it. That's Nike, but
you can say it. They're not listening to this podcast. Let's be honest. Just do it. Actually, I'm pretty sure that's the standard response we get from a lot of folks. They're like, just do it. Like, just do it. It's going to work. Like, we're telling you it's going to work. But, everybody's got to get to that place on their own and make that decision for themselves. So thank you so much, Steve, for coming on the podcast and having this conversation with me. I also just want to give a quick shout out to you for your choice of attire for today that you wore, a green shirt. Like, I appreciate that you were representing the brand colors of my business. So thank you so much for that. I didn't want that to go unnoticed. But thank you so much for being a client and being on this podcast. And then just obviously to continue being a supporter of my business as well.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.